Hi, everyone. My name is Kristina Dooley, and I am the founder of Estrela Consulting. And I am very excited to be hosting today's Star Path webinar with someone I think is pretty special, Kevin Barnett. Kevin and I go way, way back. I won't say how many years or how many decades even now, Kevin, because I think that will age us both. But I have known Kevin since he was an undergraduate student at both of our alma maters, Hiram College in Ohio. And I just told Kevin that when we were putting together our list of potential guests to have as part of our Star Pass webinars, I thought of Kevin because he has a really interesting career and one that I think a lot of students and families don't really know that much about, and school counselors. And so I thought, well, let's invite Kevin on and we'll learn a little bit about his particular path. And as with all of our Star Path webinars, we always want to just put out the disclaimer that this is one person's path and one person's journey to where they are today. But it's, I think, helpful to hear where people have come from, what kinds of advice they might give to potential students potentially looking at these careers, and then maybe if there are other things that they would like for you to know, we'll let them share that too. So again, without further ado, I would love to welcome you, Kevin. Thank you for joining me. And I would love it if you could just share a little bit about your background and maybe just a snapshot of how you got to your current role, and which again, like I said, is a very interesting profession. So maybe just give us the timeline.
Of course. Well, Kristina, thank you for having me tonight. This is really a special privilege to talk to you, talk to the students and counselors and other individuals that are participating with the webinar, either actively or will watch the recording. So thank you for having me. But as Kristina said, my name is Kevin Barnett. I am the Senior Funeral Director at Joseph Gawler's Funeral Home in Washington, D.C. I started my life after high school at Hiram College. Kristina was actually involved in my pathway to Hiram. She was my admissions counselor, and she really helped guide me to find Hiram as the school for me. I majored in biomedical humanities, and I have a minor in biology. Going into college, I had thought potentially about being a funeral director, but I didn't have necessarily a set pathway towards that. And I'd also thought a little bit about maybe being a dentist, or something along those lines. So Kristina had guided me to the biomedical program at Hiram, which was really a collection through a liberal arts background of everything from the sciences to literature, poetry, theater. It was a really interesting major that anything that you learned within that could help you in a career in healthcare. So that was a strong foundation for me. But throughout my 4 years in undergrad, I sort of hemmed and hawed about being a funeral director and if it was the correct path. I thought maybe I should focus more on like a medical school or dental school. So I actually shadowed a dentist the summer of my third to fourth year of college. And I also shadowed a coroner. Being from Ohio, Ohio has coroners, which are elected positions, but they're typically physicians or pathologists. And so I shadowed a coroner over the course of 2 months. And I realized from that shadowing experience that I didn't really want to do either of those two careers. And so that put me into my fourth year or senior year of college. And I still thought about being a funeral director, but I wasn't quite sure if that was the route that I wanted to take. So in a sort of strange path, I worked for a nonprofit for 3 years, but just in the back of my mind, I still kept thinking about being a funeral director. So after some careful consideration and conversations with some folks that I volunteered with, some people that were part of my nonprofit that I was working for, I decided to look into mortuary school. And I attended I applied, excuse me, and was accepted to the Pittsburgh Institute of Mortuary Science, which is a program based out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. It's one of the older mortuary programs in the United States, and they have a really strong approach to funeral directing from not only the professional standpoint, the accreditation standpoint, how do you obtain your licensure, um, how do you operate successfully as a funeral director, but they're also trying as a program to really see how the industry will change over the next several decades. And in researching different schools for me within the mortuary science programs, I felt a connection to that because I felt that if I'm going to be participating in a career for potentially 30 to 40 years, I should want to see how that could approach or how that could change in the future. And so that's why I liked the PIMS program. And interestingly enough, most mortuary programs, you're either obtaining a certificate or associates in specialized technology. But the programs do strongly encourage to either have a bachelor's degree or to, after mortuary school, to finish a bachelor's degree. It's not required by most states to have a bachelor's degree to practice or obtain licensure, but it helps you in having a better background. It helps make you more marketable. I know in hiring practices that we look at, oftentimes we look at either experience or if someone does have a bachelor's degree or some level of foundation beyond mortuary school. But after finishing the program at PIMS in 2011, I obtained an apprenticeship or residency in Cleveland, Ohio, at a firm called Berkowitz Kuhlman Bukatz. And I was with Berkowitz from 2011 to 2013. And I decided to move to the greater Washington, D.C. area in 2013. Most people don't realize this, but a lot of funeral homes are part of networks or they have relationships all across the United States. There are some that are still privately held, but in major cities, more often than not, funeral homes are part of a larger network or corporation. And there's benefits to that, not only financial benefits, healthcare benefits, those traditional things that we would associate with any sort of position, but also I expressed an interest in moving to the DC area on a Tuesday following the Easter holiday. By that Thursday, I had an interview scheduled in the Washington, D.C. area. By the following Tuesday, I was flying down to Washington, D.C. for interviews, and I think I had an offer by that Thursday. So there's some benefits within a corporate network for that flexibility. If some people aren't comfortable within corporate networks, there's also headhunters within the funeral industry to help you locate changes within the profession, firms that may be more of what you're looking for. But in 2013, I began working with a firm called Domain Funeral Home, which they have 3 locations, one in Alexandria, Virginia, one in Springfield, Virginia, and a third in Fairfax, Virginia. And I was with them from 2013 to 2016. And in 2016, I moved to Joseph Gawler's, where I have been since 2016. And it has been an amazing experience. Every single step along the way. I have met amazing people. I've learned so much from my colleagues. But Joseph Gallers is such a special institution. I feel like I have found my people, the place that I'm most comfortable with. My colleagues are some of my best friends. And in any environment, no matter what you decide to do, finding that niche where you get along with your colleagues can make all the difference. Um, so, but Gallers as an institution, which I think Kristina alluded to in her introduction, in written form as well as just a few moments ago, we do have the colloquial recognition of being the funeral home to the president. And Gallers has had the unique honor of over 150 years of serving more presidential families than any other funeral home in the United States. And I once had a client say to me that when a nation mourns, Joseph Gallers is there to guide them through it. And I get to be one of those guides. And I think that's a really special privilege to be able to have that moniker and to be just a steward for that for a period of time.
That's a pretty powerful endorsement for what you do. That's for sure. I would love to hear, Kevin, and I think this is probably something where maybe it's a little opaque for most people in terms of what, when you went to school for mortuary science, what does a curriculum entail? And someone going to school for mortuary science, I mean, truly, I think there's probably people that I don't even want to know maybe what people think that entails, but I also, in addition, I'd love to hear from you in terms of whether you feel like your background in the biomedical humanities program, if that helped you in some way to what you're doing now, because like you said, it combines some things that are different than traditional science-based things. But starting off with the curriculum piece in your program, maybe tell us more a little bit about that. What kinds of things are you learning?
So the Mortuary Science program, there's a strong focus on, of course, interpersonal communication. There's a strong focus on just different practices that religions may have, or people that don't identify with a religion, what those practices may entail. There's of course a biological or chemical component where you learn the processes to help maintain a physical body until potentially a service can move forward, or a cremation or something along those lines. There's a law. You learn actually quite a bit about business law, funeral laws. The Federal Trade Commission has a strong oversight over the funeral industry. So you learn about the Federal Trade Commission, the nuances of the funeral rule within that. You also learn about psychology. You learn about how you're a guide for someone during some of the worst days of their overall lives. And to a point, you learn how to understand your own mortality, but in a healthy way that helps you be that proper guide for someone. You also learn how to talk to people that may be different from you, either socioeconomically, or they may have a different viewpoint towards religion or things like that. So there's a number of different things that you learn. But I think the overall crux of the program is just understanding where someone is and what you can do as a funeral director to help meet their needs. And so there is actually, I think, a level of consultancy that you have as a funeral director. You're potentially identifying what a client needs before they may know what their needs may be.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Oh,
And mortuary school, I think, teaches you that.
do they teach you how to emotionally set yourself aside from what's happening? I mean, I feel like
I
that
think
would
I
be
think they do.
challenging.
I think they do. I think you do have to have sort of a strong foundation of your own person. Um, I I think why my pathway was a little long is I don't think that I was as emotionally prepared for what you may see on a day-to-day basis. Until maybe I was a touch older or maybe a touch more mature.
Mhm.
I think I had to come to terms with my own mortality, my own fears, any of those things. I think you have to learn to embrace those. But and through like psychology of grief, through the program, through there's a course actually called funeral directing. It alludes to kind of stepping back and saying, okay, this experience has happened to this client outside of my own person. How am I feeling? How am I going to cope with whatever this experience may be for them in absorbing it through me? Does that
Mhm.
potentially
Mhm.
make sense?
Mhm.
Um, so I think with that, you have to be able to learn how to absorb that loss and maybe realize that it's not yours and your role is separate from the client. It's not to say that you're not empathetic because it's actually quite the opposite. It's a very empathetic profession. But I think that in being a successful funeral director, you have to not only show empathy, but you have to understand that it's not your situation. Um,
Mhm.
and that even if you do know the person that has passed away, and I've had that distinct privilege of knowing um, some of our client families or the people that have been lost um, and that really is a distinct privilege that your friends or acquaintances turn to you and you're then their emotional rock for that period of time. Having a strong network of people behind you or positive ways of coping, so through exercise, yoga, taking your dog for a walk, working out, being with your children or your family, um, cooking a good meal. You have to have those healthy outlets
Mhm.
to understand. And I think the really special part about being a director and when you do have that healthy outlet and you can experience something with your client, um, but you don't let it get to sort of your own aura or your own spirit, you then start to realize just how beautiful life is, from the people around you. If a friend changes their lipstick or if, a colleague gets a new tie or, um, just any of those little things like I saw today like I can't remember the flower. It's it's not lily of the actually yeah I think one of the lily of the valley was coming up sort of early in my front garden and like I was really excited about that because I mean it's February, it's a little early for their season, but you notice little things like that and you just see how beautiful like the little nuances are in life, and that's a really special and maybe perhaps unique privilege um, because you are sort of confronted with loss and mortality on a day-to-day basis. So
That's a really beautiful perspective. I mean, to have, like I think again that may be one of the things that's a misperception about that this particular career field, is thinking of it as being incredibly sad and incredibly, although, which I'm sure that it is, but there are,
Mhm.
to your point, I love your recommendation, or, thought that you need to have those balanced opportunities for you
Mhm.
to take, self-care time with those you love. But I love that. I love your observation of those little things, that you look at things maybe a little bit differently when you're working in a field like this. So I think that's a really interesting observation.
Mhm.
Um, if you were to be, you mentioned that you had done some internships and shadowing and all those kinds of things as a college student. If you, in your role as a funeral director, if you were hiring a summer intern, what kinds of things would make you want to hire them? What character traits, or I know you just mentioned, like, someone obviously who's empathetic, that kind of thing. And what alternatively, what would make you not bring them back for that interview, or, when say, no, I don't think this is right for you.
Um, gosh, I've been involved with hiring practices, and having experiences where you have really good interpersonal communication, a great sense of humor. If you can usually we try to have our interviews very conversational.
Hmm.
Um, there's not a set list of questions or anything like that. It's more of just if you can talk to a person and find some level of common ground, or just talk to people. If
Hmm.
you can do that, then I think the interview goes well. And that's not to say that if a person's nervous or they're quiet, or that's not necessarily their personality to be talkative, that they wouldn't be successful within the program or within the profession, excuse me. But um, I think that if you can have a good conversation, and if you can talk to people about sports, art, music, anything that you can think of, um, then that serves as a really positive way to be part of the profession or be hired within the profession. We had an intern a few years ago who became a colleague, and she is an absolutely amazing director. And she a lot of her interview just was a conversation, and she talked about being a waitress, and working at, I think she was working at Starbucks when she was in college, and um, working in retail, working in those professions where you have to serve people. Having that sort of background is actually a really positive and background, and that's something that we look for,
Hmm.
because you do have to anticipate someone's needs, or be able to deliver on what the client is wanting. And so people that have worked in retail or food service, even if it's just a summer job,
Hmm.
that's a really good experience.
Hmm.
But also being able to have that good conversation. So
Sure. And I imagine people that you mentioned early on, and this is probably one of the things, especially I'd say in today's world, that's probably a challenge for some people, is the ability to understand perspectives maybe different than yours, or even
mhm,
people's values, religion, all
mhm,
those kinds of things, and to be able to set that difference aside and understand that you are trying to help them with what they need, and they may have, again, those differences. But I imagine that people coming into who want to get into a profession like this, who can't do
mhm.
that, would
Yeah,
probably struggle very much.
yes. You know, I will say this: being in Washington D.C., no matter what side of the political spectrum you may fall on, um, you need to be able to serve the opposite side
Mm-hmm.
and serve them well and serve them fairly. And um, and that's, that's just something you have to be able to do. And if you can't, um, this isn't for you.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, I'm trying to think of the best sort of description for that. Both parties are well represented within our operation, and we have
Mm-hmm.
definitely had to switch sides um, to serve our clientele, and um, and I think that's a good thing, is to be able to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Within our history, we've served controversial figures. Um, and we always sort of go back to that, when a lot of people weren't or refusing service to individuals. um, we stepped up and we did it. And so, being part of a firm that's willing to do that, maybe not every funeral home does that, but
Mm-hmm.
our firm does. um, but I'll use the example of the conspirators that were involved with Lincoln's assassination. We actually were involved with two of their services. And um, sort of on a different note, um, during the 1980s with the AIDS epidemic, when a lot of people were being refused service because of the AIDS epidemic, or even more recently, people were afraid of the COVID pandemic. Um, Funeral homes had to move forward and serve those clients. And
Mm-hmm.
in particular, where I work, Joseph Gallers, we were very proud to reach out to the LGBTQ community to serve them. But then, we also served the family of President Reagan when President Reagan passed away. So,
Mm-hmm.
so there's that balance that you have to be able to serve everyone, and be that neutral party to
Mm-hmm.
that.
Well, so I have two last questions.
Mhm.
So the first is, are there any myths that you feel that you hear? Because I'm sure when you're at, I don't know, family gatherings or reunions or whatever, friend gathering with friends from college, are there any myths that you would love to just clear up about your profession in general? Like what, anything. This is your chance.
Um, I think that one of the biggest myths is funeral directors are all old white men. And I know that I am a white male, but
But you're not
most
old.
well, I'm not old, thank you. Um, but a lot of mortuary schools, the majority of their incoming classes are majority women, or other minorities. Uh, for instance, my class at PIMS, I think, was something like 60% women. And of our entire class, I think 30 to 40% identified within the LGBTQ plus spectrum. So I think maybe another myth within the profession is um, funeral directors are often really religious. I don't think that's
Mhm.
necessarily accurate. I think there's maybe a spirituality, or like, as I mentioned before, an understanding of your own mortality. But I don't think that a lot of funeral directors, at least within my experience, are really overly religious. They may have their own faith, or they may participate with a church, but I think that they can appreciate all different beliefs. So I think those are probably the two biggest, is that it's just a bunch of old white men, or very
Yeah.
religious people, and it's quite the opposite.
I think the first myth is probably a result of the movie My Girl. No, I'm just kidding. That's my kids' scope of when I explained to them who I was meeting with tonight and explaining what you do, and that was their frame of reference. So
That's
we'll have to make sure.
I will say that's probably my favorite funeral movie. I think there's different levels. Um, people of course reference 6 Feet Under. They'll reference one called Bernie. Um, but I think My Girl is probably a better representation of the industry. And plus it's a good movie. So
I agree. I agree. All right. Well, my last question for you is, and I can tell that you're proud of what you do, and I can tell that you're proud to work where you work, and it sounds like you've you found a really good place. I mean, it just in terms of, having also having not just what you do, but having, great colleagues. I tell my students a lot that a lot of their joy in what they do will be the result also of who they're surrounded by, and that kind of thing. So I would love to know from you. Obviously, you've been doing this for a bit of time, and it may be hard to choose one, but what is your proudest moment in what you've done in terms of your career? What's made you most proud?
Oh gosh. Well, I think the superficial answer would be I was on the cover of the New York Times a
Ooh.
December. That was really cool, but it's not necessarily my most proud moment. I mean, it was to be able to say that is incredible, but um,
And
gosh,
you were on the cover of the New York Times at a service. Was that?
yes,
Yep.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
My colleague and I, and so the image is the individual whose service was taking place. The current president was present at the event, and so the photographer captured an image of my colleague and I at the service, and then the president is paying his respects.
Mm.
And so, I think of myself, I'm just a kid from Carrollton, Ohio, and that was really, I've been reading the New York Times, gosh, since I was probably in the 7th and 8th grade. So that's kind of cool to be able to say that. So, um, but I think that's definitely the kind of glib or superficial answer. But I think the more serious answer is I had a situation where um, a young girl had passed away. She was had a terminal cancer. She was, I think, 10, if I'm
Mm.
remembering. And her parents were immigrants, and they lived in the DC area. Um, her her parents, their primary language was French. They were from a francophonic country, and her aunt was the primary contact because she was the English speaking person. And I remember they brought in this really beautiful princess dress for this little girl, and they were going to have like a small service with just some family and friends and people that were part of their network. And um, the the mom had not said anything the entire time we interacted with one another, and we had her have the family do an identification just before the visitation began, and she was in the princess dress, and we knew that some of her classmates were coming, and so we adjusted the space to be more friendly to children. So we covered all of the sort of boring artwork with the little girl's favorite Disney princesses, and then we put like her favorite Disney characters and like Pokemon characters on the walls. And the family had catering, because catering is becoming a common part of a lot of funerals. And um, so the family wanted like children friendly food.
Mhm.
And so we had like chips and like, I think chicken tenders and like little things like that from our caterer. And but the I walked with the mom to see her little girl, and she just hugged me for like 5 minutes, and she never said anything, and I didn't say anything, but I hugged her back. And I think that I think I knew then that somehow whatever little thing I did to help get them to that situation, where the mom could at least hug me,
Mhm.
I knew that I was doing something right, and that was a really good feeling. And her aunt said that the her mom kept saying she didn't want to move forward with the burial and everything, but her mom was fine the next morning moving forward with her daughter being laid to rest after everything. And that was probably one of the proudest moments of my career, was to be able to do that, and help her mom see her little girl, um, as her little girl again, without the medical intervention and everything that
Mhm.
she had while she was sick. So that meant a lot.
Well, that is beautiful. I mean, just in so many ways, visually, I I mean, emotionally, all those things. I mean, and I definitely could see why that would be a proud moment. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Mm.
Well, I am proud of this kid from Carrollton who has done some really cool things since I met him as a high school student. Thank you so much, Kevin, for sharing all this personal stuff with us and some advice. It's really helpful. And again, like I said, the start is such an interesting career that I think a lot of, young people don't maybe necessarily have on their radar, but maybe definitely have the skill set and the personality and the, like you said, the empathy and the interest in serving people in this way. I mean, it's really obviously very much a service industry in terms of that. And so I appreciate all that advice that you gave. And if anybody watching, students, counselors, parents, if you've got questions, please reach out to me. I'm happy to connect you with Kevin if he's willing to answer any questions that you might have. But we appreciate you taking the time, Kevin, to be with us tonight. And he rescued a stray dog this evening. He didn't mention that at the top of the hour, but he's busy right now doing that as well. So he's just a kind-hearted soul. And I'm really proud to know you, Kevin. And so thanks for taking the time to be with us tonight. And thanks for everybody for watching and joining us. And enjoy the rest of your evening, Kevin, and keep
Thank
doing
you.
great things. Great to see you. Take care.
Good to see you too. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.